you, David. Thank you, David and Luis, for hosting me here. So I've been listening to a lot of great papers here, so I'm really glad to have the chance to present my own paper here. So this paper, the title here is More Credit, More Babies, Bank Credit Expansion, Housing Prices, and Fertility. So I was motivated by this graph here, which shows that the fertility rate in US has been declining, right? Though here we measure fertility as the number of births per 1,000 women, and then we can see there's a long-term trend in terms of decline. And also there's, if you look closely, there's two waves of decline. One wave is happened in around the 1990s, and the other is more recent. And this seems to be a continual trend, right? And interestingly, if we put this fertility trends together with the bank credit expansion, we see whenever, so this dashed blue line here, this is the bank credit growth rate at the aggregate level, right? So whenever we see a decrease of the fertility, it's kind of accomplished by this increase of credit supply, right? So this naturally, the research motivated me to ask this research question of, are there any, causal relationships between bank credit expansion and fertility, right? So the trend, the time series trends we observed earlier, whether there's a causality story behind it, right? And also more importantly, if there's a causality relationship, what are the potential mechanisms that are driving this relationship, right? So that's the research question in this paper. So to empirically, if we want to identify the causal relationship between bank credit expansion and fertility, there are two challenges here. The first one is related with the measurement, right? So fertility, as we have observed earlier, usually was measured among thousands of women, right? So you need to have a really large sample in order to have a reliable fertility outcomes, right? So the usual household survey, for example, PSID, it only has thousands of households. So it's really hard to capture reliable fertility trends using those survey data. On the other hand, we have this endogeneity issue related with those causal, if we want to identify a causal relationship, right? So it's a two problem here. The first one is the omitted variable problem, right? So we may have some unobserved economic shocks that will increase local credit supply, at the same time increase the household income, right? And when they increase household income, this may increase the fertility, right? So if we just run an OIS regression, this will bias up the real effect of credit expansion. On the other hand, we may also have this reverse causality issue, right? So if local banks take into consideration of population growth, of local fertility into consideration, they may make credit supply decision taking into consideration of fertility, right? So this will be fertility rate affects bank credit supply instead of bank credit supply affect fertility rate, right? So if we want to have identify the causal effect of credit expansion, we need to address those two issues. So in my paper, in this project, I was trying to, address both of those two issues. The first one regarding the fertility measurement, instead of using a household level survey data, what I'm using is this CDC Voto statistics and natality birth data from 1990 to 2004. So you can think about it as a digitalized birth certificates of all the live births in US, right? So it's a really large data sample, which covers almost every birth in US, which will give us a really good, reliable measurement of fertility trends. Regarding the endogeneity issue, what I'm doing here is making use of this natural experiments research design, taking adopting this U.S. interstate bank branching deregulation in 1990s, right? So the idea here is making use of this policy change as exogenous shock for state and year-level bank credit expansion, right? So fortunately, there's some previous, so this was built on previous results, which have found that this interstate bank branching deregulation has increased the local credit supply regarding like the amount of mortgage loans as well as the number of local banks, right? So and also because of this deregulation happened in a staggered way, so I'm able to adopt those newly developed staggered difference in difference method to to identify the causal effect of credit expansion on fertility. Okay, so now that's the empirical part in terms of challenging, right? So what about the mechanisms? What are the potential mechanisms that can connecting bank credit expansion and the fertility, right? So it turns out, I think the relationship between those two variables are actually very complicated. We can from a theoretical perspective, if we think about the children as a normal good, there are actually three potential mechanisms that bank credit expansion may affect fertility outcomes. This is from housing, labor, as well as the financial market perspective. So first, regarding the housing market channel, this is the idea here is when a local bank bank deregulation happened, we have an increase of credit supply, and this increase of credit supply are likely to raise the local housing price, particularly in areas with inelastic housing supply. And this housing price channel is well documented in Ferreira and Ingben's 2015 AER paper, right? So when we see the housing price increase, this may affect household fertility decision from two perspectives. On one hand, housing price, we think about it as the housing cost, right? So that means for renters, they have the rent increase, and for potential homeowners, they will have to pay more in terms of down payment and also the mortgage payment. Also, if they want to increase the housing space for expecting the children to have more children in the future, they may have to pay a higher cost, right? So when they have this higher cost, this will have a negative effect on fertility, right? On the other hand, right, if you are lucky enough that you have purchased your house before the bank deregulation, you are able to enjoy an increase of housing wealth, right? And this may have if we think about this a wealth effect, then this will have a positive effect on household fertility decision, right? So from the housing market channel, we are the theoretical prediction of the connection between bank credit expansion and fertility. It's not decided, right? And here we also have the labor market channel, right? So if we think about the credit expansion can stimulate local economy and the job growth, this will, on one hand, increase the females' job opportunity cost, right? So this will decrease the fertility, right? So basically, more moms may more likely to take jobs instead of having babies. On the other hand, we may see an increase of household income increase. This will have a positive effect on fertility, right? Again, thinking about the baby as normal goods. And finally, we have this financial market channel, right? If credit expansion can ease credit for household and relax their liquidity constraint, this may have a positive effect on household financial resources, which may increase fertility, right? So taken together, we see, you know, there's a lot of different channels, and from a theoretical perspective, it's hard to predict what are the impact of or direction of the impact of bank credit expansion on fertility, right? So this is another motivation of why we want to do the empirical work to figure out what are the real impact or the net impact of credit expansion on fertility, okay? So, you know, to give you a heads up of my main result, my main results find out that the bank deregulation has reduced and delayed the fertility, right? So it's a negative effect between bank credit expansion and the fertility, right? And I find the county level fertility rate was reduced by about 10%, and the maternal age was delayed by 0.75%. And in terms of the mechanisms, I have designed several tests, and the result here suggests that the housing cost channel is the major driving force behind credit expansion and the reduced and delayed fertility. So in terms,
I had one clarifying question, and you're probably going to talk about that, but just to make sure I'm able to connect the dots on the mechanism. So why would the bank credit expansion, I mean, I understand how it would affect the equilibrium housing prices, but at the same time, I don't know if you're considering this, but it would provide access to credit to more families. And yeah, so I'm wondering, like, these two seem to be going in different directions in terms of housing access. And so
that's right. So I completely agree with you. So I think what you are talking about is the financial market channel here, right? So they have more credit. So this may, you know, helping them getting access to home ownership, right? But on the other hand, you know, in areas with, you know, inelastic housing supply, we see the increase of housing price, right? This will giving them a barrier in terms of getting access to home ownership, because now it's costly, the cost is higher. So there's two effects. You know, regarding the home ownership and the things you mentioned here, I do have an ongoing project that particularly looking at the effect of banking credit expansion on home ownership. And what I find there is actually overall is a negative effect. So I would say like the effect of bank credit expansion would have a really large distribution effect across, you know, the income distributions. For different group of people, the net effect might be quite different. And also regarding, as I will show later on, there's a large cohort effect. You know, the differences across the cohort effects. Yeah. And thank you for the question. So any other questions before I move on?
Luis has a healer.
Hi, this is Luis Lopez. I have to make a distinction since there's two Luises here. I was curious if you also look into government triggered channels. So I'm thinking about tax credits that are given for dependents that may have been passed by Congress during the 1990s. And then also, I'm also thinking about the Medicare reform that occurred during the 1990s that gave access to healthcare to low-income pregnant women.
Yeah, thank you, Luis. Those are really good questions. I think for this version, I haven't looking into those different, you know, other different policies that happened at the same time. I would say like one of the later on, I have some robustness check, basically looking at areas with, you know, inelastic housing supply and the relatively elastic housing supply. My argument here, and I find that the results are mainly concentrated in areas with inelastic housing supply. So I think my argument here, I would definitely do some more robustness check, taking into consideration of those policy changes that you are talking about. But I think one of my arguments here is you know, when the Medicare, all the other policies, they are not necessarily related with the housing supply elasticity, right? They happen in housing elastic areas and also inelastic areas. But the fact that my results are concentrated in areas of housing supply is inelastic, showing that housing cost channel might be the driving force here. Okay, so any other questions? Okay, so I would briefly mention some of the literatures here. Of course, this project was built on two large literatures. The first one is on the declining fertility, right? So, you know, the decline of fertility has been an important phenomenon that happened in a lot of developed countries in US, like Europeans, and also in some developing countries like in China, South Korea, and the people talking a lot about the consequences, you know, regarding the declining fertility. And also there's a lot of different explanations has been brought up, try to explain why fertility has been declined over the years. I think the contribution of this project is bring up a relatively new explanation regarding the financial market and the housing market factors to explain this fertility decline, fertility demographic trends, right? On the other hand, this paper is also built on this large literature on bank credit expansion, right? So there's a large number of papers have already looking at the consequences of bank credit expansion, and they can be divided largely into two categories. The first category mainly focused on deregulation in 1970s and in 1980s. And there was a lot of outcomes, economic growth, business cycle, income inequality, innovation has been looked at by those group of paper. Basically, I think it find that there are large real economy impact of those bank credit expansion. And more recently, we see several papers looking at the 1990s deregulation, but not like in terms of numbers, the relatively smaller number of papers looking at deregulations in 1990s. And my paper here using the 1990s deregulation. And most of the results find out based on the 1990s deregulation is more about the price effect instead of those real economy effects. So I think the contribution here is I have been looking at the fertility outcomes, which is kind of hopefully can broaden the scope of the literature, you know, to help understand what is the real consequences of bank credit expansion. Okay, and the plan here is I will first talk about the background, basically what is the bank deregulation that we are talking about in this paper. And then I will talk about data and empirical method. Then we have the main results. And finally, we will talk about, you know, discuss some mechanism tests and what are the results regarding those mechanism tests. Okay, so before I move on to talk about the background, any questions we have here?
I have a question.
Oh, sure.
Is your data going to stop with the global financial crisis, or are you going to continue into the 2010s?
So for now, I'm only looking at from 1990 to 2004. I think there's two reasons I'm doing this. I'm making this choice here. The first one is regarding the data, I'm using the county level fertility, and the county code is publicly available only, you know, until 2004. So after 2004, the data, they have data there, but you have to apply. So it's a restrictive use after 2004. But also, you know, I would love to look into the real impact during the recession and also after the recession. This is on my to-do agenda. But of course, I want to, for this particular project, I want to differentiate out, but maybe in the future project, I would like to apply for the data and also looking into the impact during recession and also more recently during COVID. We have the large credit expansion this period, right? So that's definitely on my to-do list.
I asked that just because it's such a different pattern after the 2010. And it's good that you're not including those data because I don't know they would fit as well as as the period you are covering.
Yes.
So I'm fine with it. I just wanted clarification.
Yeah, sure. So, any other questions? Okay, so now let's talk about the bank deregulation. So it turns out, though, I just learned those when I started this project, right? So basically, the U.S. state has restricted interstate banking and branching until 1970s, right? So basically, before 1970s, if I'm a Texas bank, I'm not allowed to operate or open a new branch in other states, right? So that's previously, right? And then over the years, the banking sector has been deregulated, and we can think about it as two phases. Phase one, we have the 1970s and the 1980s. There's a series of deregulation has been permitting the interstate banking, right? And as we talked about early on, a large literature have been looking at the impact of those series of deregulations. What I'm looking at is this 1994 deregulation, which is called Interstate Banking and Branching Deregulation, which permits the interstate branching, right? So basically, this is talking about as a Texas bank, I'm now allowed to open a new branch in other states, right? And even though this is Interstate Act, this is a federal level policy, but the states has been giving some flexibility in terms of determining how they can deregulate and when they deregulate, right? So as you can see on this graph here, this is the bar here basically give us the number of states that have been deregulated in that particular year, right? So we can see most of the deregulation happened between 1996 to 1998. So those 3 years are the most of the deregulation happened. And also we have 9 states that are not deregulated during my sample period. So those are the never treated states, and we need them because those are the good control groups, right? And also this graph here shows the geographic patterns in terms of the time trends of the deregulation. And as you can see, most of the never treated states, those are the Middle Western region, right? So those are the those are the blank area. Those are never treated states. And regarding the colors, those darker colors, those are early treated states. And when we, you can see they are mostly located on the coastal area, and then moving to the to states in the middle, right? And as documented in the literature, so as you can see that this kind of deregulation across time and across states, this gives us nice variations that can help us capture the exogenous supply of bank credit, across state, and give us enough variations to help capture the causal effects of banking credit expansion on fertility, right? And this is actually have been documented in the literature, which have found that bank deregulation have actually increased the number of mortgage loans and also the number of interstate bank branches in the deregulated states, right? And what my results are built on those results to making use of those deregulation created exogenous shock in terms of the credit expansion. Okay, so now this is my data. So the main data I'm using here is the fertility outcome was built on this, digitalized birth certificate data. And I construct the fertility rate at the county and the year level. So basically, this is the number of births divided by number of females aged from 15 to 44, right? And the population data is also from the CDC. And I want to emphasize here, this data has been used to do some other fertility result before, but most of those measurement was constructed at the metropolitan area level or the state level. And here I want to construct it at the county level in order to capture this large variation across the housing market. In terms of the housing price and also local housing supply elasticity. In addition to fertility rate, I also have maternal age, which was also calculated at the county year level to capture the timing of fertility. Okay, so this data also have some information regarding mother's birth cohort, race, ethnicity, marriage status, and also birth order of each birth. But unfortunately, some limitation of this data is it doesn't have information regarding household income, labor supply, or homeownership status, which is kind of important for us to if we want to do more analysis regarding the mechanism test. So I have, using the ACS data to do some supplementary analysis, which is, they have some of those information here. And fortunately, my main results are actually very consistent using the fertility, the certification data, as well as the household level data. And other, in order to also control other factors, I have been using 3 sets of time varying control variables, which including economic factors, this including unemployment rate, generosity of welfare benefits, and also some demographic factors, which build on county level using the CDC data, and also other reproductive policies that are, looking at by the literature. So here, this is my main regression model. So basically, the first one is very standard difference in difference method with a two-way fixed effect, right? And the first one is trying to capture the overall effect, and the second one we were trying to capture the dynamic effect. Okay, so one of as we talked about early on, the policy change here we have is the staggered policy change across the states, right? So there's some recent development regarding this two-way fixed effect, the difference in difference when it try to capture the staggered, when the setting is a staggered policy change, there might be some bias caused by the two-way fixed effect model. That I think the potential bias here is because we are using some already treated states as the control group, which might be problematic, right? So to deal with this problem, I have been using this color-based antenna method to try to address this issue. And the idea behind this method is they use never treated and not yet treated states as the control group, and they try to avoid using those already treated states as the control group, right? So I will refer to this method, the CSDID, for the rest of my talk. Okay. And also, just to demonstrate the problem here with those using, the two-way fixed effect model, I have been doing the baking decomposition, right? So we have, so basically the two-way fixed effect model, if we run it, that the weighted coefficient including 3 types of comparison between treatment and control, right? So we have this triangle, we have those triangle here. Those are the treatment and the never treated. So those are the good control comparison, right? But we also have some light star here. Those are using the early control, early group as a treatment, and the later control as later treated as a control group. So those are okay, but you can see the coefficient of them are relatively small, while the good treatment here are most of the coefficient are negative. So what is more problematic is when we use the later control group, but early treated as a control group, right? So those are a little bit darker stars here, and you can see those will bias up, or because most of the coefficient here is positive, so this will, you know, bias down the negative effect captured by those relatively more reliable comparison between control and the treatment group, right? Okay, so this is my main results table. The first column here, we have banking deregulation reduce the fertility rate, and as well as increase the maternal age. And the second column here, I start to use the CSDID method with my baseline. As you can see, the negative effect is remain here, but the size is much larger, right? So this is consistent with the baking decomposition, as we see some of those, you know, by using the already treated as a control group, this will, you know, some of those coefficients are positive, so have been making, if we getting rid of them, the negative effect is larger, right? Then for the rest of those columns, those are considered as the robustness check. Well, in the third column, I exclude not yet treated control group. And in the fourth column and the fifth column, I've been adding those time varying control group, control variables. And finally, in the sixth group, I have gotten rid of some of those states that have going through some reproductive policy changes to make sure the results are driven by deregulation, banking deregulation, instead of other reproductive policies. So across those different specifications, I see my results on fertility, negative fertility rate is very consistent, and also the positive effect on maternal age is also very consistent across those different specifications. Okay.
It looks like Yunji has her hand up.
Say that again.
Sorry, hi.
Hi, Eugene.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
Yeah, question, super interesting paper. So question is, so when I was looking at the map, seems like those states that are treated are like growing, are more likely to be growing states compared to the never treated states. So I was just like worried about the confounding factors that those states are likely to draw more specific population that are less likely to having a child for whatever the reason. So how should we think about those confounding factors?
Yeah, sure. This is a really good question. So what I have been trying to deal with those those confounding factors is I've tried to, including some of those economic factors and also the demographic factors, try to control those, confounding factors. And also, later on, I will show the time trends. It seems like the pre-trends, we don't see really large pre-trends in terms of the fertility change or fertility difference comparing treatment and control group. Those differences only happened after those states has been deregulated. So I think those are kind of the arguments I have here to try to, deal with those confounding factors.
Interesting. Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions regarding the main results here? Okay, so, the takeaway message here from the main results is, when states that has deregulated, we see the fertility rate decrease and the maternal age increase. And putting it into the size of those effects, here the coefficient is the negative 0.07. This basically means reduction of 7 births per 1,000 women, right? And on average, the fertility rate is around 70 per 1,000 women. So this translated to about a 10% decrease in terms of fertility rate. Okay, so here, those are the graphs that, regarding the event study that, I can show the pre-trends as well as the negative effect regarding the fertility rate, right? So on the left-hand side, we have the two-way fixed effect and the CSDID, which was corresponding to the column 1 and the column 2 in the main table. And as you can see, before we don't really see a pre-trend between, the differences between treated and the control group. But after we see in the deregulated areas, those fertility rate has been decreased. And on the right-hand side, we see all those robustness checks, and across the different, specifications, we still see the decrease. And similarly, here we have the maternal age, the event study graph for the maternal age. So again, before we don't see a really pre-trend there, but after we see an increase of the fertility, maternal age. And this one, I have tried, alternatively different. There's not just a CSDID, but also other DID, a staggered DID method. So I have tried those different methods, and of course, different methods. There's some little variations, but overall, it's quite robust. Okay, so that's about the main result. So any questions before I move on to talk about the heterogeneity effects? Okay, so now here we have the heterogeneity effect. As I talked about earlier, there's some limitation with this data that we are not able to break down the fertility rate by all the groups that we want. But here I'm able to break down the fertility by race and ethnicity. And as you can see, this is not just for minority household. This is also, this negative effect is also very strong among the white household. And what is interesting here, I think, is the mother's birth cohort. We see most of those negative effects are concentrated among the cohorts that are born in 1970s to 1985, right? So most of my sample, the mothers are born in 1970s to 1980. There's not a lot in after 1980, so I group them together here. But I think this makes sense considering that for those group of household or mothers, they are around of age 20 or 30, so that are the age that they making the fertility decisions. So this effect are more evident among them, right? And particularly at the same time, they are also making the home ownership decisions. So the housing cost effect may be particularly strong on them because they have a relatively small number of financial resources, haven't been able to build up their financial resources yet. But the result, as you can see, for older cohorts are relatively small and also not significant. Regarding the marital status, we see the effects are a little bit stronger among those mothers who are not married. In terms of a birth order, we see the negative effect is strong in all three groups, right? So there's a reduction of the first birth, but also reduction of the second birth and reduction of having more babies, right? So this is a kind of like across those different orders, we all see those negative effects. In terms of a maternal age, we see some similar trends here, but the impact on among the Black and Hispanic household mothers here, the delay of a birth is the effect is stronger. But in terms of a birth cohort, again, we see most of the effect is concentrated among mothers who were born in 1970 to 1985. Okay.
Looks like he has a hand up.
Oh, hi. I just have a question regarding the birth cohort. And actually for 1970 to 1985, this woman, maybe they're also delaying their marriage. So, so did you try the interaction between like married or not? Or maybe they wanted more career progress rather than having family earlier? I think there's a big difference changes also in the attitudes of having family or not. So
yeah, exactly. I think that's a really good point. Actually, I have tried a little bit regarding the interactions between the cohort and the marriage status. I think, as you can see, I feel like there's some suggestive evidence regarding like, housing cost or the banking deregulation here have not only delayed fertility, but also marriage and also home ownership. But, because of this data, as I said, the limitation, we don't really have a really good, measurement regarding the home ownership as well as their labor market outcomes. We don't have it in this data, but I do have some supplementary results using the ACS data as well as using the SIP data. The results are consistent there. But the labor market outcome so far, as I will show later on, is not very significant result. So it's more about the housing cost channel instead of the females, the career choice or their labor market choice is, will explain the results we have here.
yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So,
And
Luis?
Xi, did you do any of these heterogeneous effects across different income groups and across different housing tenures?
That's a really good point, Luis. I would love to do that, but I think for this data, as I mentioned, they don't have income, they don't have home ownership status, so
okay.
I'm not able to do it. But this is on my to-do list because I have the household level data. I'm trying it at ACS as well as the SIP data. So for ACS, in terms of the ownership, I've tried. I think it's in the appendix, and I included in the appendix. Right now, I think the result is those negative effects. It's not among renters, they are also among homeowners. So I think the explanation here is...
Sorry, say that again. It's not among renters, but only among homeowners?
No, it's among renters as well as among homeowners, right? So initially I've been thinking about, for owners, they are more likely to have this wealth effect. So this might be, we may not see the negative fertility effect, but it turns out this negative effect is also, we can also observe them among homeowners. So I think the idea here is you have to be a homeowner that happen to accumulate enough wealth because of the deregulation. You cannot be those newer homeowners. So the tenure, the housing tenure matters, right? So it'd be,
right.
It'd be ideal if we are able to looking at the effect across different housing tenures and show a pattern there. But for now, I don't have that result yet. Okay, that's a good point. Any other questions? Okay, so now let's, get back to the mechanism, the discussion of mechanisms, right? So as I talked about early on, there are those 3 channels, and some of them may increase fertility and some of them decrease the fertility. But now, if we are on the same page, that the main result is showing that banking deregulation actually have a negative effect on fertility, right? So now my question, or my focus here will be how I can differentiate those different potential explanations behind this negative effect, right? And as we talked about earlier, there's 2 candidates we have here, right? On one hand, this might be because of the housing cost channel, right? Because of a banking deregulation being driving up the housing cost in particular area, this reduce household fertility. Or this is because of the increase of females' job market opportunities, so they are more likely to taking those jobs outside of home instead of having babies, right? And I want to emphasize here, what I'm trying to do here is not to exclude those other explanations, but because we already have the net effect, which is a negative. So what I'm trying to do here is trying to figure out which one might be the driving force behind this negative net effect we observe here. It is possible, like the banking deregulation may have a housing wealth effect, which increase fertility or wealth among certain group of household. But what we want to do here is to figure out the negative effect. What is driving the negative effect here, right? Okay. So in order to figure out those housing and the labor market channels, which one is the driving force behind this negative fertility effect, I have tried 3 tests. The first one is very straightforward. Instead of looking at the fertility, I'm looking at how banking deregulation affect housing market price and also the labor market outcomes, right? To directly looking at the housing and the labor market outcomes. So in terms of the housing market outcome, I using the housing price, the county level, FA housing price index to look at whether there's a connections between banking deregulation and this housing price index. In terms of the labor market, I'm using the quarterly census of employment and the wages, which have a good measurement in terms of county level wage and the employment of different sectors across, a really good coverage, about 95% of US jobs, right? So those measurements will give me give us a better understanding of what are the mechanism or the intermediate channels of how banking deregulation are affecting household fertility decisions. So here are the results. So regarding the housing price, as we can see, deregulation has a positive impact in terms of the housing price, the county level housing price. And I also have the event study graphs, which was included in the paper, but not in the presentation. And those following columns, I'm looking at the labor market outcomes. So for the second column and third column, I'm looking at all the industry, but we don't see a clear, strong or significant results regarding banking deregulation and the labor market outcomes. And particularly if we're looking at the female-dominated industry, which I mean education, health service, leisure and hospitality, and the finance industry, we don't see a strong result regarding the employment and the wage in those sectors, right? So those results I see as suggestive evidence that the housing cost channel or housing market channel is more likely to be the driving force behind this negative fertility effect instead of the labor market outcomes, right? And the second test I'm trying to do here is thinking about the housing cost channel or the housing market channel is more likely to be evident in areas with inelastic housing supply, while the labor market channel are less likely to be affected by local housing supply elasticity, right? So I have been dividing all the counties by their labor supply elasticity, and here I'm using the proportion of developable land data, which was collected by Luz and Sand 2022 paper to measure. So that here I'm using the measurement as if whether a county has the developable land are less than 70% as the cutoff to look at, whether the fertility results are stronger in those areas with less land or in areas with more land, right? And as we see here, the fertility rate, negative effect on fertility rate and the positive effect on maternal age are more significant and with a larger coefficient in areas with less land, but they are less significant and with a smaller coefficient in areas with more land. And this is consistent with the result on housing price, right? Similarly, in less areas with less land, we see the housing price has increased a lot, while in areas with more land, we see the housing price haven't increased a lot. Again, so these are consistent with the housing cost channel instead of the labor market channel. And finally, I've been using this county level where I directly estimate the effect of housing price on fertility outcomes, but using the interaction of banking deregulation and the land availability variable as an instrument. Right. So the idea here is to see whether there's a channel through banking deregulation, whether banking deregulation affecting the fertility outcomes through this housing price outcomes. And here is the result of this instrument variable result. And the first 4 columns here, we use fertility rate as outcome, and the following columns, we use maternal age as the outcomes. And when we use the fertility rate, we see a negative effect. Housing price have a negative effect on fertility rate, while has the positive effect on maternal age. And in terms of the F test here, we have, around 43 or 9, which means this instrument is, less likely to be a weak instrument here. And again, this is consistent with the housing cost channel instead of the labor market channel. Okay, so I think I have 5 minutes here, right? Okay, so I think I want to use the rest of my time talking a little bit about the census ACS data, which is the supplementary result I have here, right? So as I mentioned early on, the certificate data, we don't have household income, we don't have ownership, so it's hard to do a lot of those mechanism tests here. So to supplement the main result, I use the census ACS data. So the census ACS data have a larger amount of variables, but at the same time, it also have its own limitations. First, regarding the fertility measurement is not reliable as the certificate data, right? And at the same time, we only have data in 1980, 1990, 2000, and more recently, we have annual data since 2001. But remember, the deregulation happens between 1990 to 2000, right? So we are not using the census data, we are not able to capture those 10 variations regarding the deregulation, but we can have the pre and the post deregulation. So in terms of the fertility outcomes, we see is consistent with my main result. We find the deregulation have reduced the fertility rate, and this effect is concentrated among the cohort who were born in 1970s to 1985. And regarding the mechanisms, I'm directly using the housing cost and the labor market outcomes in the ACS data as some mechanism check. And we see that deregulation have increased the housing cost, but has no significant effect on females' labor market outcomes regarding the labor force participation or hours of work, right? Okay, so now I want to conclude here. So the main results we have here, or the main takeaway from this paper, is banking deregulation have reduced and delayed the fertility. And looking at the heterogeneity effect, we see this is mainly concentrated among the cohort who were cohorts of mother who were born in 1970s to 1985. Regarding the mechanism, I have some suggestive evidence showing that the housing cost channel might be the driving force here. So the policy implication here suggests that the fertility rate is not at the optimal level. If we and also point out the important role regarding the financial market policies as well as the affordability housing in addressing the declining of fertility. So for my next step, some of them I mentioned early on is instead of just focusing on those 1990s period, I also want to explore it post 2008 and by using those restricted fertility data. And also I'm working on an RDC project using the SIP data to looking at how banking deregulation are going to affect the home ownership, marriage, and the fertility at the same time, because that household data will have more, variables beyond the fertility data we have here. Okay, so that's all about my talk, and thank you everyone for coming and questions.
So Tony has his hand up.
It was very good.
Thank you.
Sorry. Yeah, look, we do know that mortgage interest rates don't vary spatially, right? Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and FHA have the same interest rate everywhere. So banking deregulation does not affect mortgage interest rates spatially. There's a paper by Hughes et al. In the AER about a year or so ago where they complain about that. But the fact is that it doesn't matter what you do to the banking system, mortgage interest rates do not vary spatially. And therefore, they shouldn't affect the differential price of housing in different areas.
I think the interest rate part is actually to my advantage, right? Because what I'm trying to argue here is not because the interest rates are at the national level, so I don't need to worry about them to affect them differently across the treatment and the control groups, right? I think most of the housing cost that we show here is actually in terms of the housing price instead of the interest payment. That's
yeah, but I mean, how does banking deregulation affect housing price if it doesn't affect mortgage interest rates?
Oh, okay.
I mean, so you have to come up with, at some point, you need to come up with an economic model of that. The connection between the banking system and the price of housing is the interest rate, right?
Yeah, I think it's I should double check, but my understanding this is not from the interest rate, but instead is from the amount of loans that have been supplied in that area.
Okay, it's the same thing that also isn't priced geographically. Okay,
I think that
and FHA do not geographically price differences in housing markets, period.
Yeah.
Banking regulation has no effect on that policy. Besides, actually, you know, Fannie and Freddie are the ones that control mortgage prices.
Yeah, but I think I didn't, you know, repeat. I didn't, you know, I should have done some robustness check. But I think there's papers. What they have been showing, previous literature they have been showing is the banking deregulation have increased the amount of mortgages in deregulated area, as well as the number of bank branches in that area using the HONDA data as well as the FDIC data. So there are some results, some evidence there showing, you know, connecting banking deregulation as well as the amount of mortgage loans. And the argument I think there is,
look, only a tiny fraction of mortgages are supplied through branches. I mean, they're supplied otherwise. And, you know, you have thrifts and what they're doing. And obviously the thrift industry was in collapse during part of this period. But really, the price of mortgage credit in the United States is simply a national price, and doesn't vary spatially as a result of pretty much anything you want to do, because Fannie and Freddie and FHA are either buying or securitizing all the mortgages in pools that go across the whole country, right?
Okay, yeah.
Jean-Francois Hood at University of Wisconsin has a couple of good papers that might be really good here. He looks at bank mergers in Canada and finds that, you know, decreased competition leads to decreased supply. Now, obviously, Canada is a different institutional setting, but the argument is that, you know, there's lots of people, you know, shop locally, and it might not work through rates. It could work through basis or you know, upfront fees people pay for mortgages. So I think there's various channels that could be working.
Yeah, I think yeah, just to add on that, I think the argument made in the literature is when bank deregulations, what the banks has been able to supply, the reason banks are able to supply more loans locally is because they are able to run more efficiently by allocating different of their deposit to different area. But I, you know, I will, you know, double check those channels here. Thank you for the question.
Okay, again, there's a paper in the AER on this. I mean, it's not my opinion, right? You can check Hughes's paper in the AER. It's about a year or so ago.
Okay.
Gee, I had one clarifying question about one of the policy implications. So you say your paper implies that current fertility rate is not at an optimal level. So what do you mean by what is the optimal fertility rate? How is that determined?
Yeah. I think what I'm trying to say here is without those housing costs, right? If we compare areas with high housing costs and the low housing cost, you know, areas with low housing costs, their fertility level is more at optimal, right? And you put it in another way, I think there are more mothers who would like to have more children, but they are not able to do that because of those higher costs. That's what I mean.
Oh, okay.
Not.
So they are optimal under the conditions.
Yeah,
Okay,
I agree with
you're not claiming that they're making the wrong decision.
Yeah, I'm just saying there's some
or anything like that. You're saying the information without those constraints would be the decisions without those constraints would be.
Yes. So, any other questions?
I'm sorry, if there aren't any, I had one more lingering question. So you analyze the mechanisms using the instrument, right?
Yeah.
So this you're taking like a separate route from the staggered diff and diff that you use in the main results, right? You're not using staggered diff and diff.
Yes, that's a different approach. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, you know, when we use those deregulation as the instrument, you know, I think those staggered issue that the people point out in the difference in difference method may also be there, but I'm not sure like how we can deal with those kind of bias in an instrument setting. That's something that
Right, that's why I was curious.
Yes, that's something I think I see people talk about it, but I'm not sure like what is the standard way of doing that yet. Right. But I think unfortunately the comparing the CSDID and also the two-way fixed effect, they are at least the direction is consistent. Okay.
I have a question kind of related to the literature.
Mm-hmm.
I just did a quick Google search and I found a paper by Isaac. He finds the opposite results.
You mean the mortgage babies, the babies of mortgage?
Yeah, the mortgage babies.
Yeah. So
then he argues
yeah,
that
I should have mentioned that paper more, you know, in details. So I think that paper, they're looking at the different deregulation for one. And also the data they are using is the ACS data. So I think in that paper, they are emphasizing the credit supply in terms of getting people to more likely to buying a house and you know, having babies. I didn't do like I was trying to replicate their results, but I think the major reason why we have different results is because we are looking at different deregulations. You know, so the results might be different, and particularly here we see a large housing price effect, which was driving the housing cost and the negative effect. But in his deregulation, the different setup, this housing cost issue might not be particularly strong. And there are also a couple of papers looking at banking deregulation, or not necessarily banking deregulation, but the housing wealth effect. And those papers also find out that you know, if we look at particularly among homeowners, there might be a positive housing wealth effect on fertility. I think what this paper is different from that literature is what I'm emphasizing here is this housing cost effect instead of the you know, instead of the wealth effect.
Okay, so any other questions? Thank you, Shi, so much for a great presentation, great paper, and thank the audience very much for some really great questions. We're going to take a break on the seminar series until January. So Simon Buchler from MIT will present January 17th on the value of market signals, evidence from commercial real estate development. Should be another great seminar. I hope to see you all there, and I hope you all have a wonderful holiday season, wonderful New Year.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you everyone for coming, and thank you for all the questions.
Thanks everyone.
Mm-hmm.